very, very important. I wanted to thank Brian and Holly, along with Sherry and Amy, who I knew did a lot of work in the background to help put this together. I've been I was ordained in 2003 from the Jewish Theological Seminary, and in the 20 years or so, I've been active with upperclassmen in high school and college students. I have seen this situation just get more and more stressful when it comes, not on every college campus, but it rotates around, not on one single college campus at a time and not everyone at a time, but just a pressure or a feeling of discomfort. It can be as simple as that, from what's being said and what's being done, a sense that you can't express yourself the way you want to express yourself, or you're being judged just for who you are, or what you might believe. And it's become more and more essential to prepare our current college students and our college students who are on their way to campus to be ready to face that, to recognize that that's could be, not definitely, but certainly could be part of their college experience, how to respond and to expect it, and how not to be taken off guard. So this was put together, and I'm so grateful really as a resource for all of our students and their parents to understand the situation out there, and that it does not have to run your college experience. It doesn't have to be the main point of your college experience, but there's a great ways to be able to manage this and enjoy your time on campus and be who you believe and stand up for what you believe in. And so I want to thank all our panelists for being with us tonight, and looking forward to a really wonderful program and a really wonderful talk. So thank you all so much.
Thanks, Rabbi. Yeah, so I'm Brian Fink, and I'm a member of WJC, and so I'm co-hosting tonight's event with Holly, as Rabbi just said. And this is part of the World Jewry Committee and the Teen Engagement Committee tonight. So we've got an excellent panel of speakers who are speaking, and the idea is that Jewish students are going to understand a little bit more about what campus life is when you're Jewish, and how to involve yourselves in Jewish and the Israeli community, and what to expect on campus. My hope is that this is an educational session, and it's going to inform students on what they're going to experience. But it's also important to note that most students on campus don't experience any anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism, right? And students shouldn't be scared, right, if they come across it. But hopefully today's discussion, will give them a head start on how to react and what to do. On behalf of WJC and Holly, right, we're honoured to have a really good panel tonight, who we're going to introduce in a second. But they are experts on anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism on campus. Okay, Holly.
And you're all going to have the opportunity in a moment to meet our great speakers. But before you do, I wanted to talk briefly about our format. We'll be together for the next hour, and Brian and I are going to spend about 45 minutes teeing up questions for our speakers. While you're listening, if you have a question, please use the chat box at the bottom of your screen, or the side of your screen, to type in a question. And during the last 15 minutes or so, their chat will choose a few of these questions to read to our panelists for their responses. It'd be useful if any existing students or high school seniors can name their colleges in the message board or the chat box, so that the panelists can see which universities people are attending or will be attending. And please also put your thoughts about what being Jewish means to you, why Israel matters, and why Israel matters in the chat box. We'll soon be responding to your thoughts. We're also recording this conversation, and we'll make the link available to the extent you want to share it with your friends afterwards. And with that, I'm going to give it to Brian.
Yeah. So we've got 5 speakers tonight, and I want to introduce them briefly. Actually 6 speakers, three panelists and 3 students. So we've got Rachel Klein, right, who's the Executive Director of Hillel's of Westchester. Rachel, do you want to just say hi? Great. Rena Nasar first, who's Executive Director of Campus Affairs at Stand With Us. Rena. And then we've got Joel Gordon, who's Associate Director of Alums for Campus Fairness. Okay. And then we've got Yoni Nierenbeg, who's a student at Long Island University and a member of Students and Parents Against Campus Anti-Semitism. Yoni? and Ofir Dayan, who's a student at Columbia University and president of Students Supporting Israel at Columbia. Ofir. And then we've got Ben Rosenbaum, who's our own WJC student at University of Maryland. Hi. So first question, Holly, to you.
Rachel, this question's for you. The first question is, as a leader of Jewish student organizations, what does it mean to be a Jewish student on a college campus? And why should Israel matter to the majority of students?
Thanks, Holly. It's a great question to start off with. And I first just want to thank you and Brian and the Westchester Jewish Center community for welcoming us and bringing us together. I know a lot of people on this panel personally, and I'm just really excited. So to your question about what does it mean to be a Jewish student on campus and why should Israel matter is really the crux of everything that I do. It comes down to the fact that college is a time of choices. Majors, minors, classes, friendships, study abroad or not to study abroad, clubs, fraternities, sororities, everything is a choice around them. So at Hillel, for us, what it means to be Jewish on campus is creating a vehicle to build community for students and providing a source of comfort. We try to live being a home away from home for students. We are a resource for learning and for challenging. I very often say that my role is to comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. So to be a source for their learning and most importantly, to engage Judaism as a tool to help guide those decisions for every individual. So it's a very personalized path for every Jewish student. So I often refer to Judaism as a how-to guide for making tough life choices. So the question about why should Israel matter, it's complicated. It's everybody's favorite answer to that. For us, we look at the question in three ways. We have our own Israel mission statement, and it breaks down the discussion of what is Israel into three categories. Am or Klal Yisrael, Medinat Yisrael, and Eretz Yisrael. And I'll quickly explain each of those as we use them. So Am Yisrael is literally the people Israel, as in Moses spoke to the people Israel. So it is, in this sense, Israel is the unifying force for Jews all over the world. It's the people, the idea, the Am Yisrael Chai, the feeling of to be part of the nationhood of Israel. Medinat Yisrael, specifically the geopolitical state of Israel established in 1948, and Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, referring more to the promise from God that the people Israel will prosper in their own land, which may or may not include the boundary as we know it today. Most imagine that it is a much bigger area in that region. So why should Israel matter? Where we come from as Jews, I just explained, there are three ways to consider your own personal relationship with Israel. Which one of those three areas resonates with you and why? And then we take that and look at it in the broader context of why Israel is attacked so disproportionately in the media, on campus, at the UN, as so beautifully articulated by Nikki Haley during her ambassadorship. Campuses are a microcosm of that issue. So why should Israel matter is a personal answer to get to the complexity of the changing conversation around the conflict.
Okay, that's great. Okay, so next question, Rena. What's the current climate on campus and which groups or individuals promote anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism, such as BDS? And then what are also some of the forms of the more subtle anti-Semitism that people might be experiencing?
It's a great question. I think when people analyze the campus climate, the first thing that comes to mind is all of the anti-Israel sentiment, all of the anti-Israel activity. You know the expression, if it bleeds, it leads. Those are usually the top articles reporting on what's going on campus. There certainly is a very big challenge when it comes to the Israel conversation, but there's also tremendous opportunity. And before I get into where that anti-Israel activity and that anti-Semitism is coming from, I'd really also want to make sure that everyone on the call knows that on every campus, there's also blooming Jewish life, pro-Israel life. Either it's in full bloom or it's on its way there. But, you know, the first headlines you do read about campus tend to be negative because those tend to be the articles that get the most engagement. It's important to know that there is prospering Jewish life and pro-Israel life on many campuses. That being said, when it comes to the anti-Israel activity, I would categorize it as coming from two main subgroups. Either it's student-led initiatives or it's coming from faculty and administrators. From the student-led category, you have groups like Students for Justice in Palestine, which is a group that has a very noble sounding name. People want to be part of a grassroots movement that's led by students. They want to be part of justice, but it's a group that's really designed to take a hard hit at Israel on campus and, for the most part, within their activities, target pro-Israel students. You also have groups like Jewish Voice for Peace, which also sounds like such a progressive, cool movement you'd want to be a part of, just with the buzzwords in the name. That's pretty much the Jewish version of SJP, pretty much putting on the same type of activity, but it's even harder when you have JVP, Jewish Voice for Peace, on campus, because they're saying, oh, well, how could this type of activity be anti-Semitic? We're Jewish. So how could that be the case? Another subset you have within the student collective is a newer group called If Not Now. That's particularly started by students who were fed up with whatever Jewish education they were brought up with and actively protest different things like birthright in particular, claiming that birthright is lying to everyone about what's going on. Meanwhile, if you have really good questions about what's going on, birthright is the place to be. Birthright is the place to go. I'm not a walking ad for birthright, but I am a big fan of birthright. The other group you have that could be perpetuating this type of activity on campus is faculty. You have it in the classroom, where professors might be taking time to have anti-Israel materials on a syllabus, or they might be inviting students to go to an anti-Israel event and give them extra credit. When it comes to the student activity, even though you see it and it's blatant, it could be easy to avoid if you're not interested. When it comes to faculty and your professors, that stares you right in the face when you're in a class, and you might not know what to do. And that's, I think, where that more subtle anti-Semitism can come in. And I think in general, there's a big confusion about what we could consider legitimate criticism of Israel and what's crossing the line. There's a really good measure that we use here at Stand With Us. We didn't invent it. It was Natan Sharansky's method of the 3 Ds. If a statement demonizes Israel or Israelis, compares them to Nazis, demons, evil, if it delegitimizes Israel's right to exist as a country, or if it holds Israel to a double standard unlike any other country, that's when something crosses the line. So it's really important that anyone who's engaged in any type of conversation around this knows how to identify when something could be considered anti-Semitism. Even if something, let's say, is really problematic in what someone says, but it doesn't cross the line, it doesn't mean it's not an opportunity for education. Every opportunity is, through conversation and learning and growth. But it's always good to just be able to analyze what's in front of you and take it from there.
Yeah, that's great. And Joel, maybe you can tell us a little bit about what Alums for Campus Fairness does, right, and how it came about. That'd be great.
Of course. Alums for Campus Fairness, also known as ACF, is America's unified alumni voice on issues of anti-Semitism, demonization of Israel, and bigotry. We started in 2015 at a small little liberal arts college in Poughkeepsie, New York, called Vassar College. And since then, we've grown to over 40 chapters across the country. And what we do is we mobilize thousands of alumni to help support Jewish students on campus and help combat anti-Semitism as it comes. And we do it through a chapter system. So chapters all over the state of New York and all over the country are standing ready to support students when anti-Semitism rears its ugly head. Whether that may be BDS, whether that may be a Jewish student getting assaulted, a Hillel being vandalized, or even at quieter campuses, we take part in building Jewish community. Because the best way to combat anti-Semitism is to build a strong Jewish community that can be resilient in the face of anti-Semitism on campus.
Okay.
I'll take the next one.
Yeah.
Ofir, how did you come to advocate for Israel? And what are some of the grassroots activities where you have been most active on campus?
So as you can probably hear and see from my name, I'm Israeli. Advocating for Israel on college campuses wasn't, the natural path that I intended to walk on. I arrived at Columbia, you can say by mistake. But the reason I came to advocate for Israel on college campuses is very simple. I'm going to share a story with you. But before I do, it's important for me to express one thing. Even if you don't have the same experience that I had living in Israel, being in the IDF, that's fine. That doesn't mean that you can't advocate for Israel and be great and amazing and do incredible stuff. This is just my personal story. So I served as an officer in the IDF spokesperson unit during Operation Protective Edge. And as a part of my job, I was in charge of bringing in international media outlets and bringing them into Gaza with the brigade that I was the spokesperson of, the 188th Brigade in the Armored Corps. And one day I bring a reporter from a very big news agency here in the US to enter Gaza with the commander of my brigade. And before they go into Gaza, I tell him, the reporter, if you have one question that you want to ask before you go in, because obviously you can't ask questions there, ask it. And the only question he asked my commander was like, Commander, do you have any kids? And my commander said, yes. Why? And he said, how do you feel about killing kids the age of your kids in just a few moments from now? And this reporter is someone who has lived in Israel for 15 years. He is very well versed in everything that is happening. And to me, it was clear that the reason he was asking this is because he needs to fit a very appealing story into a 2-minute segment. But to me, that moment was a moment where I understood that I need to come here and speak to the people. Because if all they know about Israel is what they hear from these 2-minute segments, that's extremely bad and distorted. Fast forward a few years, I went to officer school, I did a few things, and then I came here to study at Columbia. I joined Students Supporting Israel as soon as I got into Columbia, even before I officially enrolled. Best decision of my college career by far. Some of the activities that I've been involved with, obviously everything that SSI does, because I've done every position in the organization so far, but some of the main activities that we do, we have speakers coming to Columbia to speak twice, 3 times a month. It could be Israeli politicians, it could be artists, it could be, we brought even a Native American chief to speak about how he learned from Zionism and how he aspires for national liberation for Native Americans, all kinds of events. But I would say that our biggest event by far is that 1 week a semester. We do a week called Hebrew Liberation Week. We stand with huge displays outside on the main walkway of campus, and we explain about Israel, about Jews, about the connection between Jews and the land of Israel. We combat hateful narratives like the Jews are white Europeans who came to colonize, the land. So this is something we address a lot by explaining about the different communities in Israel. Different diasporas, and this is the main thing we do, obviously, in addition to attending 100% of the anti-Israel events at Columbia, respectfully waiting for the Q&A and then challenging them to expose their lies and anti-Semitism, and larger things that come and go. For example, Columbia hosted the anti-Semitic Prime Minister of Malaysia, and we protested that by emailing the president of Columbia, getting him to denounce the prime minister on stage, calling him an anti-Semite, and we went there and spread pamphlets with all his anti-Semitic statements on every single chair in the room, so people know who they're listening to. So these are the kinds of activities that we do. SSI is known as being more proactive in this sense, doing stuff that are a bit more controversial. And this is something that fits me, not everyone, but to me, this is something I found that fits me very, very well.
Thank you. Ben, can you touch on that? How did you come to advocate for Israel? And what are some of the grassroots activities where you've been most active on campus?
So I've been involved with, I guess, Jewish Life Zionist activities since I was very young. I mean, I was involved in a Zionist youth movement, Young Judea. I went to their camps. I was involved in their year-round programs. I served on regional and national board. And so I, from that, learned a lot about Israel, about Zionism. I learned plenty about how to advocate for it. Young Judea took me to a couple of, a few different APAC conferences. They sent me to policy conference. They also sent me to their high school leadership summit. So I learned plenty from there. And also I went to Jewish day school my whole life. So I always had a lot of exposure to Israeli current events, Israeli issues. And then after I graduated high school, I went on a gap year in Israel on Young Judea year course. And I spent 9 months living in Israel, just trying to live as an Israeli to a certain degree. And I was living, for half the year I was living with other Israelis. So it was always an important part of my life. It wasn't so much that, but it really took a while and still haven't had much experience where I've needed to advocate for Israel in the face of intense anti-Israel sentiment. When I got to college, I didn't get so involved in pro-Israel activity early on. I did get involved with Hillel and Jewish life generally. And during my first semester, after I got to Maryland, there was a BDS resolution. It was the first time that it had come up at the University of Maryland ever. And it was a really just intense campus debate, very civil. I think both the pro-Israel community and the pro-BDS community were, I think, still figuring out how they wanted to be talking about divestment, how they wanted to be talking about Israel to the wider campus community in such a controversial, intense issue like that. I just wanted to, but to get back to the question of how I got involved in pro-Israel activity on campus is I just wanted to continue engagement with Israel. It had been such an important part of my life before I got to college, and I wanted to continue it. And the way I could do that was through pro-Israel student organizations on campus that were running programs, hosting speakers, hosting events, and that has really been my activity. It's it's pro-Israel advocacy has really come second. And it's really, I just take these opportunities to talk about Israel and have these events where I can learn and engage with others and teach others.
Great, Ben, thanks.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, that's great, Ben, thank you. And Yoni, question for you. You haven't experienced much anti-Israel activity at Long Island University. However, you did help to pass an anti-BDS amendment, right? So, how was that experience, and why do you think it's important for Jewish students to advocate for Israel?
Okay, thank you, Brian, for the question, and thank you, WJC and SPACA, for having me speak tonight. In the simplest terms, I think it was exhilarating for the whole Jewish community on campus, because we see on most college campuses that there are negative groups that use lies and propaganda against Israel and the Jewish people, and we know that there was once a time where Jews were hated because of their religion, and then because of their race, and now because of the nation state. And we believed on our campus at LIU that there is no one else who is going to be willing to stand up towards the lies unless it was us. And if nobody stands up, then ultimately the lie would become the truth. So we took it upon ourselves, especially the Jewish community on the student government, to be proactive and to pass an anti-BDS legislation that defined the BDS movement as a discriminatory act, as something that marginalized a part of the whole larger Jewish community and the LIU community. And that was something we didn't want on our campus. And that was something that us as the student government didn't want to fund. But it was exhilarating for the Jewish community at large, the students that were part of the student government at the time, and it's something that we're still going to see play out in the months ahead.
Okay. Holly?
Great, Yoni, thank you. Rena and Rachel, how do you answer the tough questions, for example, where Israel is framed as an inhumane actor? What rights and resources do Jewish students have on campus? Rena, why don't you go first, since I said your name first?
Sure. There's one thing that I want to add to the chat box. I'm going to pull it up. It's a PDF of a Stand With Us booklet called How to Answer Tough Questions About Israel. Now, giving everyone the PDF version is probably the most hygienic way to do it, considering everything going on with this pandemic. But normally, this is a booklet we have in print that's about this big, can fit in your pocket, and it has all these different responses to some of the most popular anti-Israel claims. That's an amazing resource. We also have a resource called, and I'll put it in the chat box too, truestory.org, true without an E. I didn't make that decision. I don't know who did, because it's a bit confusing if you do TRUE. But truestory.org, which is a website Stand With Us designed that has quick, researched, and vetted responses to what you might see on social media when it comes to anti-Israel claims. Besides the content itself, I think what's more important to talk about when it comes to answering tough questions is the conversation piece. Not everyone you speak to who's bringing in a claim like this is inherently anti-Israel. Generally speaking, in this field, we talk about this rule of thumb called the 10-80-10 rule. Different organizations have different variations of those numbers, but basically, you have around 10% of a campus space or a community that has very heavy anti-Israel sentiments, and those are probably not changing. You also have 10% of a campus community or a general community that has very strong pro-Israel connections. Those are probably not changing. And then you have this middle 80% of people who are caught in the middle. Now, where I like to take it even further, this middle 80% might not have a strong rooted connection to either side of the conflict, either side of the coin, but they're an 80%, at least in the college space, who knows they should. They know Israel is such a heated topic, and they know whether or not they have any idea where Israel is on a map, who lives there, what they're fighting about, that they should have an opinion. So some people who might be regurgitating what they read on social media, what they see on the news, what they hear from a professor, might not be based in fact, might very well not be based in fact. So we have a method we teach at Stand With Us called ARM, where first you want to address what the person says, you want to reframe it with the facts, and then you want to provide a message. We do an entire workshop on how to get that framework when you're approaching a tough question, because it allows you to think calmly and collectively, and it also allows you to potentially have really big impact on the other person you're talking to. For example, if someone is talking about Palestinian suffering in Gaza and they're blaming it all on Israel, for you to come say everyone is wrong and that doesn't make sense, you can acknowledge that people are suffering, but then you reframe it by saying, why are they suffering? Who is causing that suffering? And put it in perspective for that person, and they might walk away with their minds blown. All of a sudden, they cannot believe what they just heard. They had never heard it before. Alternatively, if you're talking to someone who's in that 10% anti-Israel camp, that's just not going to change their minds. You have the 80% that could be watching that interaction. How many of us go on Facebook, we see someone's status that's got 50 plus comments. People are going back and forth and arguing. You're going to follow on for a little bit. You're going to want to see what people are talking about. Even on a campus, when there's a conversation happening, people are walking by all the time. So it's not just about what you say, it's how you say it that could open up the potential for amazing conversation and amazing engagement. In terms of rights on campus, just one quick thing, Stand With Us has a legal department that's designed to help students know what their rights are on campus, specifically when it comes to in the classroom. It's not only limited to that, but for example, if you're in a biology class and your professor's taking class time to talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, that's not within that professor's academic freedoms, because that has nothing to do with the class content that you signed up for. So that would be an example where you as a student or you as a parent should know what student rights are on campus when it comes to in the classroom and outside of the classroom. So Stand With Us has this department that's offering that free advice and pro bono legal representation whenever someone needs it.
Great. I'd like Rachel to answer the same question, but just before that, can one of you, anyone that wants to on the panel, please answer for one of our students, just define what BDS means.
Sure.
Go ahead, Ofir.
Go ahead, please.
So the BDS movement is the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. They set demands and they want different states, countries, civil organizations to boycott, divest, boycott Israeli products, but not just Israeli products, also companies doing business in Israel, even if the company is not an Israeli company. Divest, meaning to take out all stocks, investment that a certain body has in Israel, including universities who have endowments that are invested in companies who do business in Israel or Israeli companies. And sanctions, that's mostly on the government level, where they're asking specific governments to apply sanctions on Israel until it changes its policies. The only issue, it sounds very nice and humane and civil. The only issue is that the demands of the BDS movement are inherently saying to tear apart the state of Israel as it exists today. There is no way in which all the BDS like all their goals and their aspirations can be fulfilled while Israel remains a Jewish and democratic state. And this is the problem that we have with the BDS movement on campus. Additionally, on many campuses, I know surely in mine, and some of the other campuses I've seen you guys are going to, like University of Michigan, the BDS movement is very, very aggressive, not in the sense of, advocating forcefully, but in the way of targeting specific students who are pro-Israel, in the way of spreading false information about different students, about Israel. Many of the campuses have what they call Israeli Apartheid Week, in which they claim that Israel is an apartheid, that there are no rights to Arab citizens of Israel, which is obviously not true. So the main issue, there's two issues. First of all, the demands that call for dismantling the state of Israel. And the second thing is their tactics on college campuses that are very, very aggressive, and they do not shy from using lies and propaganda that is completely misled in order to achieve these goals.
Okay, so back to you, Rachel. Right.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Ofir. I am so proud of these three, Ofir and Yoni.
Thank you, Ofir. Thank you.
Amazing. So I get that question a lot as well. BDS is the movement. The two founders of the BDS movement are unabashedly anti-Semitic. It's not just anti-Zionist. They do not see a place for Jews in the world, and there is documentation, videos, and writings. This is their position. So there is the BDS movement. There are BDS resolutions, which are the specific legislation that's put through student government, and then the clubs on campus that Rena had mentioned earlier, Students for Justice in Palestine, Jewish Voice for Peace. They're sort of the vehicle of the BDS movement. That's sort of encapsulated. So back to your question, your original question, Holly. How do I answer the tough questions? I come from a proud Zionist position that Israel is, and Israel will continue to be. And that is my red line. This has been a very sticky issue for Hillel for a very long time, because we are, by mission, a Jewish life organization that supports the state of Israel, but we are not an Israel advocacy organization solely. So it's been a very challenging issue for Hillel. So that is my red line, because I would have that same red line of humanitarianism because I am a Jew. So I would not support any student who says, I don't believe that Ghana deserves to exist. That's a red line. So I hold Israel to the same standard. So my answer is Israel is, and it will continue to be. And as Rena said earlier, she stole one of my answers, everything is an opportunity for learning. From that moment, as long as you're on this side of the red line, we can have a conversation. And as Rena explained earlier, the 10-80-10, we aim to engage the majority of people in the center. And a lot of students are apathetic. I would say that's probably the majority of the center. They just don't understand why this even matters, why it should matter to them. So we try to focus on the facts. I have those books on my desk and in every single one of my bags that I carry with me. When these conversations come up, I hand them out. I'm referring to Alums for Campus Fairness very often, sort of explaining that universe. But in education, we focus on highlighting the facts of Israel, that you have a right to your own opinion, you don't have a right to your own facts. The Jewish safety and sovereignty provided by a Jewish state of Israel. Technology and innovation, international disaster response, Israeli-Palestinian social and activist groups that are doing amazing humanitarian things that the students who are involved with Students for Justice in Palestine have no idea about. I brought 2 SJP members from one of my campus to a Combatants for Peace program. And I'm not going to go into Combatants for Peace, but just very briefly, they are Israelis and Palestinians who are primarily focused in Judea and Samaria. Look up the organization, interesting stuff that they're doing. But I brought 2 SJP students because they didn't know that these things were happening. To the question of rights, so I get pretty passionate about the Israel challenging questions, but to the question of rights, I always remind people that you are not powerless. And as I learned from one of the founders of Alums for Campus Fairness, power in this case comes from the fact that you're a consumer. You're in a business relationship with that university and you can use that to your advantage. So if a situation rises to the level of a crime, reporting it to the college administration and the proper authorities is the easy thing. Those situations are black and white. At my campuses, we average 1.25 anti-Semitic incidents every year. So those usually come in the form of a swastika that's carved into a bathroom or spray painted on a wall or flyers put up in the community, things that are clearly handled by the Westchester County District Attorney's Office. So wherever you go to college, this is an easy, quick Google search. What are the laws around hate crimes and anti-Semitism in Madison, Wisconsin, or Ann Arbor, Michigan, or College Park, Maryland? That's an easy thing to figure out those black and white. Fortunately, that's a very small minority of cases. The majority fall into a sort of gray area. So what I suggest are 4 things. Review the college's code of conduct before going to campus. And also for anyone who is involved as an alumni, go back and read your college's code of conduct. I did that recently for both of my alma mater, and I was very surprised at some things. Explore and get involved with campus clubs and organizations, like everything that we've heard today. Engage the professionals in the Israel advocacy field. Stand with us, the Israel on Campus Coalition, Hillel, J Street, APAC. There's space for everybody, regardless of what your flavor is. And use the chain of command. Document everything. I'm going to give a very, very brief example because I know I've given a long answer here, but we had a student who was taking a Middle East Studies course. She had perfect attendance, amazing participation, high exam grades, and did stellar work overall. She handed in her final paper on Israeli democracy, and her professor gave her an unsatisfactory grade because she, quote, failed to provide a clear and equal argument about Israel-Palestine. Her paper was on Israeli democracy, and that was crossing a line. So we went through this process. We spoke with the professor, we spoke with the head of the department, the dean of that school, all the way up to the provost. And that chain of command should be in the code of conduct, if not available on the website. And this is where Alums for Campus Fairness comes in, because you may not achieve resolution in that situation. And we didn't. But that professor is very likely symptomatic of a larger climate issue on campus. And that's where ACF comes in as the real experts to say, well, you've got one professor here, you've got an active SJP there, you've got some climate issues going on. So I hope that that explains rights.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you, Rachel. Joel, do you have anything to add on to that? We've covered a lot, but maybe if you want to add something around what Alums does.
Of course. And I'll pay you afterward, Rachel. Those were some great shout outs, and everything you said was entirely true, because yes, we are here to serve students from the standpoint of mobilizing alumni, but alumni isn't our only constituency. There's many organizations who deal with community members and engage with community members. From Stand With Us, who engages community members through their regional and community directors, from the American Zionist movement through their affiliate and member organizations, and there's many other organizations out there that deal with community members, JNF, whoever it may be. But through Alums for Campus Fairness, community members, especially alumni, can become activists on campus and can help us work with Hillel, work with Stand With Us, work with the local organizations to develop strategies that actually allow them to actively influence the administration into taking action that's beneficial to students. Just in New York, at Ofir's University, we had a controversial yet big report that was released this past fall, and it was titled "A Hotbed for Hate," and it got national attention, and it ruffled some feathers. For the first time, about right before coronavirus became a major thing, about 3 months ago, in the President Bollinger's statement to the university, talking about the rising tide of anti-Semitism, he commented on outside organizations who make claims about the university not being a great place for Jewish students. Well, that's not true. But what it meant is that the university president was listening to what these organizations were saying, what we were saying, what hundreds of alumni are saying, and they can no longer ignore it. Because what alumni can do, what community members can do that no one else can do, is they can influence reputation and they can influence development with no consequences whatsoever. Sometimes students will face great retribution. You know, parents might be fearful of the same for their students. Faculty who aren't tenured might not have their contracts renewed. There's a whole litany of potential consequences for every constituency of a university except alumni. So we use our immense power to be able to influence the university administration to support Jewish students in ways that other parts of the university can't. So if you want to not only be an advocate, but an activist supporting Jewish students on campus, that's where you come to us. If you want to be an advocate and you want to just learn and be educated and provide support in other ways, you can join us, but you can also join Stand With Us, or you can also join the American Zionist movement, or you can join the Jewish Federation. But if you want to become an activist and you want to help us actually build strategy and execute strategy, that's where you can come to us.
Thank you, that's great. My next question is for all three of our students. Do you have any guidance for WJC prospective college students on how best to engage with Jewish students and groups on campus? Who wants to take that? Let's go in my line order. Ben first.
Sure. Since I've been at Maryland, Maryland has such a large and vibrant Jewish community. I think we're about 19-20% Jewish students. So in a school with 24,000 undergrads, that's about 6,000 Jewish students. There are tons of different Jewish student organizations, very active Hillel. So I have had plenty of opportunities to just get involved with all these different Jewish student organizations. Very often there are, I know at my school and I'm sure at many others, there are Jewish organizations focusing on specific issues. There are going to be Jewish social justice organizations. We have an organization called J-Farm, which is about green sustainable development. It's a Jewish Hillel-based organization. So just by kind of being in Hillel, it can be really easy to find Jewish student organizations. Very often there's going to be just well-connected Jewish student network on campus you're going to find people who can help you find your community.
Great, thank you. Ofir.
So I'm just going to be brief. I think that like in the adult world of Jewish organizations, you don't really have to work that hard. They will find you. These organizations exist to recruit others. All of these organizations, including mine, you know, like we are looking forward to the moment that freshmen step on college campus. We want to find you. We want to be able to offer you to join our activities. We want to be able to be your support network when you come to campus. And as my friend here said, you know, like there are organizations focusing on every little thing from sustainability to business to Jewish literature and film, and all of these clubs are quote unquote like looking for clients to be a part of their clubs. So I wouldn't be very worried about that. Know that in most campuses, as soon as you walk on campus, there are tens of organizations who are just waiting to take you in. And they will be there for you every step of the way. I just like right before we spoke, I went downstairs in the elevator, and the Chabad rabbi and rebbitzin came to bring me a cheesecake for Shavuot. I never asked for it. This is what Jewish organizations do, so I wouldn't be worried. They will find you.
Thank you. Yoni.
Thank you, Holly. I think the best way to move forward, I think, is that being a pro-Israel advocate can come in different forms on college campus. You can be the activist that's on the front lines, right up in their faces, having those conversations, having those debates, or you can be the activist behind the scenes, working in order to make a difference. There's student government, journalism, pro-Israel clubs, organizations, even public speaking and coalition building. There's many forms that are out there on a college campus, but I think the most important part is to get involved. You cannot stay or stand on the sidelines. I think that for me is unacceptable, because there's just so much for you to do that's out there that we can find you a niche, in a sense. We can find something that can be parallel to what you enjoy and what you're passionate about, yet at the same time being involved in the Jewish community, in the pro-Israel community. Because remember, at the end of the day, this is your college experience. And what better way to do that than to get involved in your Jewish community, to get involved with your identity.
So we got one question which is sort of relevant to this as well. It's around the social aspect for students, and if they become active, you know, will some students and parents think that becoming pro-Israel on campus can be alienating? Any response to that? Ofir or Yoni?
Yeah, sure. Let me say it this way. My best friends in the world right now are people I met within Students Supporting Israel. Yes, there are people who might dislike your opinions about Israel's right to exist, as absurd as it may sound. These people who deny the very basic right of Israel to exist are bigots. You don't want them as your friends. All other people are going to be completely fine with you being proud of your Jewishness and about, you know, supporting Israel. And I would, as I said, you know, my best friends are people who are as passionate about Israel and about Judaism as I am. And in any case, I think these are the people that you want to be surrounding yourself with.
Okay. Yoni, you want to answer? Yeah.
I think just to add on to Ofir, I think since there's just so much to do on a college campus, and it, in a sense, college campus is also the melting pot. I think as long as you're keeping to your ideals and into your values, I don't think you're going to be alienated. I think you're going to be meshed into the larger melting pot. And at the same token, I think by you sticking to your values, I think people respect you more and treat you on a higher standard, because this is something that's so dear to your heart, as you being a pro-Israel advocate, or you being that person that wears that Magen David or that kippah or something that is Jewish in a sense. I think that people will give you a higher respect to see that that's something that's so valuable to you, that that's something that you're not, putting to the side.
Thanks, Yoni, that's great. So if anybody's got questions, they can put it into the chat box, and then we'll just go to the very last question, which is, in light of the pandemic, what online educational tools and resources are there for students over the summer? And what opportunities exist for them to maybe visit Israel, if attendance for college is delayed? So maybe Rachel, Rena, you want to answer that? Rena?
Sure. Right now, I actually got an email maybe an hour before I got on this call from Masa Israel Journey that come fall, if someone is signed up for a Masa program, you will have guaranteed entry into Israel, because they've been working closely with any ministries they need to in order to make sure a cohort gets there. Masa is an amazing organization that offers all types of short or long-term opportunities in Israel, whether it's teaching English to different students, whether it's internship opportunities. They also have different stipend opportunities for joining those programs. So Masa is great. I know that on the Stand With Us end, we have a platform called Stand With Us Connect that's active every Sunday, Monday, and Thursday, offering a variety of experts on all different topics, talking about all different things. And one other cool thing I'd want to share is it was actually a product of the Combined Jewish Philanthropies, their program, the IACT program. It's called Israel Street View, where you can look up all these different locations in Israel and kind of get to see them. So we have this missed opportunity here with a bunch of people who are supposed to go on birthright not being able to, providing them with maybe a Masa opportunity, looking up different locations in Street View, or even participating in a Stand With Us Connect session, I think could be really useful ways to keep them engaged and get them excited. And I hope sooner or later, Birthright will be back on that program as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna second everything that Rena said. I was supposed to be leaving. I was staffing our Birthright trip, so I was supposed to be leaving on Tuesday. That's not happening. Summer opportunities, just a short list. Hillel at Home is the Hillel International platform that's mostly sourced from all of the local Hillel. So there's a range of content. There's wellness and creating your own at-home Shabbat experiences, and a lot of Israel content on there. Hillel at Home @ Open Door, DOR, and I'm happy to send all of these to you, Brian and Holly, so you can send it out to the group. Open DOR Media, formerly Jerusalem Online U, has an unpacked media series that's actually quite good. Short, bite-sized videos that are great conversation starters about Israel and Judaism and the complexity of both things. As for visiting Israel, I want to make sure that I do state that if you take a gap year, or if you're not a matriculating student anywhere, but you are of the age and eligibility criteria, you can participate in Birthright when Birthright comes back online. I'm hearing hopes of October right now, but that has not been confirmed. And that's true of Masa and the JNF programs and other gap year programs. I think a gap year is a terrific opportunity. If someone wasn't considering it before, now is a great time to do it. And I would encourage people to visit virtually. While we're here in the safety of our own homes, it helps to bridge the powerful experience that is visiting Israel. So for some, it's the moment they get to the hotel. For others, it's the food and the people and the weather. For me, it's seeing a mezuzah on every single door that makes me feel like home going to Israel. So start visiting now. I'm a huge fan of Rick Steves. He's done a lot of really hokey, really great Israel travel. Travel and Leisure also has some great virtual tours, and Israel21c.org is doing a lot of really neat stuff. You can visit museums and ancient sites, order some falafel and shawarma, and make it a night, make it a family conversation. And the last piece of advice that I would give to students is to plan now, because these programs will be coming back online in full force. So decide, is this a sophomore, somewhere between sophomore and junior year thing, or do I want to take a semester abroad junior year? And I had my heart set on Spain, but Israel is now a much better viable option. So definitely think about, plan now, get comfortable with the ideas and with the language on your tongue now.
That's great.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I think we're bringing this to a close unless any of our panelists have any additional resources that you want to mention.
We all shared them in the chat box.
You did, great. I saw that, fantastic.
Yeah, I saw that.
So thank you so much to all of our panelists, our amazing panelists. Rachel, Joe, Rena, Yoni, Ofir, Ben, we're so happy to have you tonight. It's such an honor to have had you speak to our congregation and to our community. Thanks to Brian, my co-host and partner in crime on this. He's been planning this for a long time, so this is really meaningful to us. And we want to thank our rabbi as well. We want to thank Amy and Sherry from our Teen Engagement Committee. And just a reminder that we'll send out a link to this recording so you can have it. You can all have it tomorrow to share. And please look for more programming like this from WJC. Sarah Tuttle Singer is a journalist from Israel who'll be talking about Israel and the pandemic on June 7th at 10 a.m. And we'll have the producer from Stitzel on Sunday, June 28th at 10 a.m., Dikla Barkai. So thank you so much to everybody, and have a wonderful night and a good summer.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Bye. Thank you so much.